Hi, I'm Eliot from Magoosh, and in this video we're going to think about the IELTS speaking section and try to think through what you need to do to get a band score 8 in the speaking section. This is a goal of many of my students, and it's a tough goal because getting a band 8 is really hard to do. But if you practice the right things and if you work on your English and your specific skills for the IELTS speaking section, you can do your best and try to get that really high score. So let's take a look. What we're going to do is we're going to think about the IELTS speaking rubric, the band score descriptors, and what they say at the band 8 level. And then we're going to go through a couple of tips, some things you need to understand, do, and practice in order to try to get to that really high level. Okay, so let's take a look at each of the 4 categories of the speaking band descriptors. Let's start with the grammatical range and accuracy category. Okay, so this one is very similar to the writing rubric as well. Okay, this is something you see there as well. So this may be familiar to you, where they ask you at the band 8 level to use a wide range of structures. You need to make sure that the majority of your sentences are error-free and that you only make occasional errors or inappropriacies with your grammar. Okay, so this is something where you need to practice using a wide range of grammar in your responses. And this is tough to do. On the speaking section, unless you're recording your answers, you may not even be fully aware of the different types of structures you're using and whether or not you're using a wide variety of structures. So that's the first point to make here. The only way you're going to be aware of and be able to work on and improve in this category, if you need to use a wider variety of structures, is to record your responses every single time you practice. Okay? If you've got a tool that even transcribes your speech into words on a page, all the better. Okay, but you want to be able to go back through and analyze your grammar. Do you use simple patterns over and over and over again? Do you use simple subject-verb constructions without a lot of different types of patterns like coordination with conjunctions or subordination, right? More complicated grammar structures. You need to make sure you have a wide variety, that you're using transition words and phrases and nice things like that that give a variety of patterns and a different sequence of language for each of your sentences. So go back through, listen to your recordings, and if you find that you're using the same patterns over and over again, this is a great opportunity for you to think through what you said and how you might be able to say it differently the next time if you wanted to try to incorporate more difficult or more different kinds of grammar in your response. It's an important thing to try to do if you're trying to get to that band score 8 level. Okay, and then the second point there is that they're looking for error-free sentences. Okay, another thing that's kind of tricky about speaking compared to writing, right? In writing, you've got your essay in front of you. You can read it over and hopefully find mistakes. You could even email it off to a friend to go check it for you, right? A teacher, even if they're on the other side of the world, could go look at your essay, mark it up, give you ideas about grammar mistakes, and send it back to you. For speaking, it might be a little more difficult. Again, you've got to record yourself. You have to go through and edit your speaking. You have to think through mistakes that you make and that you make consistently, and you need to try to overcome them. How? You need to practice. Even practicing the same question over and over again a couple of times can be a really useful practice to get into in order to mark improvements, in order to try to incorporate changes that you want to make. So the process would be that you respond to an IELTS speaking question, you've recorded it, you listen to it, and then a couple of days later, after you've had a chance to analyze your grammar and try to think through mistakes and the language you want to use, you try to record yourself again. That second time, you can compare to your first time and try to notice, are you improving? Are you taking out some of the errors in your response? That's a really great habit to get into because your goal is, if you want to get to that band 8, you want to remove those errors from your sentences, which is a really high goal. Okay, so basically, To get that band score 8 level, you need to have a wide variety of grammar structures, and most of your sentences need to be error-free. To get there, really do some focused practice, analyzing your responses, listening to your recordings, and trying to find mistakes, improving each time that you practice on the same questions. The next category is lexical resource. And of course, this is where they're looking at your use of vocabulary in your responses. Okay, there are a couple of things that they're looking for at the level 8. So let's think about those things. First, they're looking for your ability to use a wide variety of vocabulary, okay, and that you can use that vocabulary readily and flexibly to convey a precise meaning. Okay? They're also looking for whether you use less common or idiomatic vocabulary skillfully with occasional inaccuracies, they say. Okay, so they're looking for your ability to use a wide variety of vocabulary there without a lot of mistakes, obviously. Okay, and they're looking for your ability to paraphrase effectively as well at this level. Okay, so what does all of this mean? Well, they say very clearly for the level 8, you need to vary your language. You need to use different words throughout your response. Okay, so this is very similar to writing exercises you may have done as well, where you've looked at words that may be redundant or repetitive throughout your response. As you're recording yourself speaking, listen for words you use over and over again, because these are things you need to try to replace. You can't score a band level 8 if you are using lots of words over and over repeatedly throughout your responses. It shows the person listening to you, the grader, that you may have a very limited vocabulary if you have to rely on the same words over and over again. And this is related to another point at this level for lexical resource, which is about paraphrasing. Okay, so in your IELTS interview, you're going to get lots of questions. You might get 15 questions or maybe more. And they're listening for whether or not you are repeating the same language that has been asked to you in the question, right? So if they ask you a question like, tell me, something you like about your hometown, okay? And if you say in response, the thing I like about my hometown is, okay, well, that's not so bad, but notice how that response uses a lot of the same language as the question. It will be a much better scoring response if you said something like, well, the place where I'm from has a lot of great things. And I think one of my favorite things is, right? Notice how I didn't really recycle much language from the question there. I changed it around. I paraphrased and made the language my own. And at band level 8, they're looking for you to do that kind of thing. They don't want to see you repeating the language from the question. They want to see you using your own words and paraphrasing effectively. Okay, and then also at the band 8 level, they're looking for your ability to use advanced grammar. Advanced vocabulary. So advanced words. What does that mean? Well, it's difficult to define what an advanced word is or isn't, but mostly they mean words that are used less frequently in just normal everyday speech, right? Most people can communicate really well with a few hundred words or 1,000 vocabulary words, but they're looking for words that extend beyond that, demonstrating that you've studied vocabulary a lot, that you've done reading in English, that you really have a strong vocabulary with multiple words in your tool belt to be able to use and pull out and use precisely and effectively in certain situations. Okay, so they do want to see you using advanced words. My advice, though, is to, especially on the day of the exam, don't use words you feel uncomfortable with, okay? And you don't want to use super difficult, very academic words in absolutely every sentence that you respond with in your interview. You want to use them appropriately, and you want to use the ones that you feel comfortable with. Okay, so in this category, there's no real shortcut to this. The way that you're going to be able to use advanced vocabulary words accurately and effectively is to study vocabulary frequently, regularly, and systematically. Keeping a journal, doing all the things you need to do on a daily basis to build your vocabulary over time is the best way to score high in this category and to ensure that you're using words appropriately and accurately to score an 8 in this category. Okay, the next category they're looking for on the rubric is fluency and coherence. Okay, so in this category, let's just think about what they're looking for at a band 8. They want to see that you can speak fluently with only occasional repetition or self-correction. They want to make sure that you don't have very much hesitation, or that if you hesitate when you're speaking, it's related to the content you're talking about. And it's a rare thing that you're not hesitating often. And they're looking for your ability to develop a topic coherently and appropriately. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff there. What should you do in order to improve in this category? Well, again, this is another one of those categories where there in some ways aren't a lot of shortcuts. The way you build fluency and gain fluency is to speak English regularly and every day over a long period of time. It's like exercise, or it's like if you've ever learned an instrument, right? If you knew piano when you were young and you put it aside for years and years and years and tried to pick up the piano again and play at the same level that you played at when you put it down years and years and years ago, it wouldn't be the same, right? And that can happen even if you put something down for a couple of days, a couple of weeks, right? Even shorter periods of time, especially with something like language. And especially with something like fluency, that can really hurt your ability to speak rapidly and at a constant pace. Okay, so the trick here is that there is no trick. You need to be consistent about speaking English. If you don't have the ability to speak English every day, you don't live in a place where people speak English on the street or in your classroom, you're not signed up for an English class, find other ways to practice your speaking. You can maybe find a partner online, even if they don't speak English natively. Just practicing your speaking, even to someone who isn't a native speaker, is really, really good and much better than doing nothing, of course. If you can't do that, if you don't have time for that, or it's difficult to arrange something like that, speak in front of a mirror, okay? Speak to your recorder at home. Just record yourself on your phone and speak for 15, 20 minutes on a daily basis. It's exercise. It's just exercising your brain, exercising your mouth, those muscles to be coordinated as you're speaking English. There are no shortcuts around it. You just simply need to practice that on a regular basis in order to maintain your fluency. Okay, but in this category is not only about fluency. It's also about how well your ideas are connected to one another, how well you are able to express your ideas in a clear way, in a coherent way. Okay, so a couple of things to keep in mind here, especially in your longer responses, the ones in part 2 of the speaking test where you give your monologue, and then the longer responses that you'll have in part 3 where you're answering more complex questions from the interviewer. You want to make sure to use words and phrases that sort of signal what idea you're talking about and how it's related to what you talked about before. And that you can accomplish often with transition words and phrases. Those are really useful, okay? So for example, when you are giving your monologue for part 2, okay, it's often the case that you're going to be describing a number of different things, right? A reason for something, or some main points that you have about the topic that you're discussing. So it's really helpful for your monologue to organize your response into those kinds of sections, like, well, my first reason for this, or my second reason for whatever it is you're talking about, right? And then you describe those reasons and devote just a little bit of detail to each one before moving on and letting the listener know, okay, now I'm moving on to my second reason, right? So organizing your response around those kinds of markers is really helpful for this category, right? And also just using transition words effectively in other parts, right? Showing that you're about to provide an example, or explaining that you're providing contrasting information with a however or something like that. It works for your written responses for the writing section. It's also important for the speaking section as well. So make sure you're focusing on those kinds of things, okay? But A final thing then is to don't forget, if at all possible, to provide detail in your responses. Again, especially for your part 2 and part 3, section 2 and 3 of the test, where you've got these longer responses. You need to make sure your responses have depth and detail. So you provide a main idea, you provide the point that you want to make, and then you explain it in some way. You provide a detailed understanding of what you're talking about. It's important to do that, okay? So don't just, if in part 3, if they're asking you a question, let's say, explain why one of the teachers you had in high school was really influential on your life, okay? So you're supposed to provide that. You want to provide reasons there. Maybe you had a personal connection to them in some way. Maybe you just like their teaching style or something like that. Well, you can make that point. You can talk about their teaching style, but then explain what you mean by it. Okay, what was it about the teaching style that was really great? Were they really personable to you? Were they funny? Did they make a lot of jokes in class? Were they able to connect what you're studying to your everyday life and make it really practical for you? Describe those ideas, the teaching style as your main idea, but then those sort of detail points as well, and don't leave them out, because they're looking for those at the Band 8 level when they're looking for detail and in-depth responses at this level. Okay, so for coherence and fluency, you want to make sure that you are practicing your fluency regularly, and that you're using transition words, phrases, you're using markers in your responses to indicate which idea you've been discussing. And then you also don't want to forget to add detail to your responses if you're trying to get to that level 8 score. Okay, and then the final category on the rubric, they're looking for your pronunciation. All right, so at the level 8 band score level, they're looking for these things: using a range of pronunciation features, sustaining flexible use of those features with only occasional lapses, occasional issues, problems, and it's easy to understand throughout your response, okay? That your accent doesn't have a large effect on a person's ability to understand you. This is probably the most difficult category in which to improve your skills, right? Different people have different natural abilities to copy the sounds of another language. And some of it relates to when you first started learning English or any other language you're studying. If you started as a child when you were very young, many times people have an easier time incorporating the sounds and mimicking, copying the sounds of another language. If you're studying another language later in life, for most people it becomes quite difficult to mimic or copy the sounds of another language. Okay, so pronunciation is by its nature very tough. Fortunately, even for band score 8, they're not looking for perfection. In fact, they don't expect that you have no accent at all. That would be quite unfair to everybody. They're looking for whether or not your pronunciation causes problems understanding you, okay? They're looking for interference with your ability to speak and pronounce English words in what you're trying to say and whether or not you can be well understood. Here's another category where to achieve a Band 8, you probably need to do a couple of things. First of all, you need to get feedback on your pronunciation. If at all possible, try to connect with a native English speaker or someone whose English skills, pronunciation skills, are maybe a little bit better than yours or at a similar level as you, and get feedback about how you sound when you pronounce particular English words. There are many, many accents in even native English speakers have, and all of them are perfectly acceptable. If you've studied English, British English, American English, Australian English, whatever it is, get feedback from someone who can help you understand what pronunciation issues you might have, the things that are getting in the way of understanding you, and then work on trying to improve those specific things. It might be particular sounds, like certain vowel sounds or consonant sounds. It might be your W's or your TH sounds or whatever it is. There are a number of really tricky English sounds. work on those things and practice them and get feedback about them. Because what they're looking for at the 8 level is that your pronunciation does not get in the way, that it doesn't appear as though you're really struggling or that it's a big effort, a lot of labor for you to pronounce words properly, that you can do it more or less fluently and be understood. Okay, so get that feedback, understand what you need to work on, and put in the time before the test to try to work on those pronunciation features that might be slowing you down or causing people to misunderstand what you're trying to say. And for more tips like this, and to understand the IELTS speaking section more fully and how you can get the best score you can in this difficult part of the test, we've got a complete guide to IELTS speaking down below for you in the description. So check that out. And if you like this video, check out these other videos over here. Lots of great content there for you to learn about the IELTS exam and how you can do the best on the test.